Hey, I just got back from my trip, the Francis Way, the Camino de Santiago. I was gone for 69 days. Now, it wasn't all in the Camino. I only spent from the day I got to St. Peter Port to the day I got to Santiago, 40 days. It was a long trip. The traveling with dystonia is what I wanted to talk to you about today. I have cervical dystonia, and my head shakes in the no manner. And when I was traveling, there was a few times that this became very problematic. I've been living in my little bubble for many years now, and I haven't had to explain to a lot of people that I have cervical dystonia because they just don't know. They see my head shake, and I joke about it a lot, like I'm not disagreeing with everything I'm saying, but it is problematic at times. So traveling, I have never told so many people in my life that I have a movement disorder. Every night I had dinner with a different group of people. Every morning, maybe a different group of people for breakfast. There were people that you traveled with, your Camino family, and you ran into those people here and there and everywhere. And sometimes you travel with them every day. Susan and I traveled a lot. Kim and I traveled a lot together. We ran into very many the same people, Hans and Jacob and many other people, Jeannie and Martin and Rosie. And I can't remember all the names right now, I'm sorry, but a lot of people, a lot of Camino family, a lot of people that you worked with or walked with, talked with, ate with on a regular basis. Paulo and Santiago and Peter, these people I didn't need to explain all the time that I had cervical dystonia. It was a one-time thing. Hey, by the way, I have a movement disorder. I'm not disagreeing with everything that's going on right now. There's nothing I can do to control it. And so that was easy. But then there was the people at every restaurant I went to. On top of the fact that I'm gluten-free, I do explain sin gluten, por cena, por comida. And my Spanish is total garbage. And so that was interesting. But then on top of the fact, my Spanish is so bad and my head is shaking no. And so people are assuming I'm saying no. And I'm like, no, I'm not saying no. So at one point, we saw an advertisement for a full English breakfast as we were walking through this little village, and I thought, oh, that sounds fantastic. So we stopped for this full English breakfast, and I was talking to Susan about the fact that they had beans. I didn't love beans, but I like beans in my full English breakfast. So I was like, that sounds great. So I went to order my breakfast at the counter, and he said, beans. I said, yes. My head said no. And I said, yes. And my head said no. And so when my meal came, Susan's came, beans, mine came, and he goes, no beans. And I'm like, okay. And Susan's like, what happened? I said, well, I guess my head decided that I wasn't going to have beans today. So we kind of giggled about that, laughed about that. I mean, it's a very small, stupid thing. But it's like a cumulative effect happens when you have cervical dystonia, and I got so incredibly tired of people thought I was saying no or disagreeing with them or being, I don't know, just not great. I don't know. I'm trying to think of what the word would be. Argumentative, which I wasn't. I had one woman stop and say, Inglés, and she didn't even give me a quarter of a second to respond when she went, oh no, okay, and walked off. I'm like, I yelled back, yes, I speak English. I have a tremor. And that is what you saw. You got to give me a second to respond. And she was like, oh, okay. And then we had a good conversation. It was fine. But it was near the end of the trip. And I must admit, I was just fatigued. I was fatigued from everything, every part of the trip. And I was fatigued from having to explain my movement disorder to so many people. One night we sat down to dinner, and there was a man from Seattle area, a woman from Australia, and a woman from the Netherlands, and then Susan and I, and we were talking, and I noticed that I was getting stared at because I had forgotten to say, hey, by the way, I have a movement disorder. I'm not just disagreeing with everything that's going on today. So I explained, I have a movement disorder, and so my head shakes from side to side in a no manner. I'm not saying no. And they were like, oh, okay. And everyone's really cool about it. It's just that it gets exhausting to explain it on a regular basis. Exhausting. And so there was a little bit of a grumpiness about me every so often when I had to explain this over and over again, to the point that when the trip, the Camino was over, I really just wanted to buy some snacks and sit in my hotel room and eat and not deal with any sin gluten or have a movement disorder. I just wanted to be alone. It was a great trip. And I want to explain more some of the other funny things that happened along the way because of cervical dystonia. So I just thought I'd start right now. So cervical dystonia, traveling with it, part 1. Thanks for stopping by.